Mitch.
They love the Cougars. Big 12 open for business.
Welcome on in, Cougar Tracks podcast, powered by KSLSports.com. It's talking season, baby. Big 12 football media days just around the corner, so that means the preseason poll and the all-conference teams are out. We're going to be unpacking all of that in today's edition of the show, and where BYU goes from here. They have low expectations heading into the 2024 season. You can follow me on X, Instagram, at Mitch_Harper. Follow KSL Sports there as well, at KSL Sports, TikTok, Facebook, you know the drill. And subscribe to the show. Leave a 5-star rating and a review. So BYU football picked in the preseason Big 12 poll at number 13 in the media poll. 61 total ballots were submitted to the Big 12 media poll. I was one of those 61 ballots. I'll reveal how I voted in the poll coming up. But, you know, pretty fair for BYU to be there. I think you could have said a little bit higher. I think 13 might be a tick low, but I get it. Going into a season, number 13. Here's how the Big 12 media preseason poll lines up. Number 1, Utah, the rival Utes, atop the preseason poll. I'll share my thoughts on that. Number 2, Kansas State. 3, Oklahoma State. 4, Kansas. 5, Arizona. 6, Iowa State. 7, West Virginia. 8, UCF. 9, Texas Tech. 10, TCU. 11, Colorado. 12, Baylor. 13, BYU. 14, Cincinnati. 15, Houston. 16, Arizona State. My goodness, that's a long list to reel off. 16 teams is a lot, folks. It is a lot. But that's the preseason Big 12 poll. And we know in this conference that crazy things can happen. Oklahoma State was the preseason 7th-place team last year. They reached Arlington and made it to the championship game. Baylor years ago was kind of down and out, and they won the league. TCU, I think, was preseason 7th. They went on to play in the national title game. They didn't win the league that year, but you know, Kansas State was near the top. This league kind of provides some unexpected outcomes, and I think that is highlighted in this preseason poll as 5 teams receive first-place votes. My first-place vote did not go to the Utah Utes. And I know you're probably thinking, oh, Mitch the Zoob, not voting for the Utes. No, that's not it at all. I just think that one of these teams is better. Kansas State. The Kansas State Wildcats were my number 1 team, so I was one of the 19 ballots that had K-State atop the poll. And here's the thing about Kansas State, and to some degree Utah too. The Big 12 lined up these teams with pretty favorable schedules, at least based on what we know going into this season. Kansas State really should have a great chance to get to Arlington. Their games in Big 12 play at BYU, Oklahoma State, at Colorado, at West Virginia, Kansas, at Houston, Arizona State, Cincinnati, at Iowa State. That's pretty favorable. You get Oklahoma State at home. You get Kansas at home. The road games, Farmageddon to close out the season, that'll be tough. But I think K-State's got the pieces to get to Arlington, and I love Avery Johnson as the quarterback. I love their backfield, too. DJ Giddens, Dylan Edwards comes in from Colorado at running back. The defense is stacked, a lot of returning experience with 8 returning starters. I just really like this K-State football team, and they got a little more familiarity with some of the teams in this conference, too. I had Utah pick 3rd. So here's how my ballot shook out. K-State number 1 was my pick. Number 2, I had the Kansas Jayhawks. I like Kansas. I feel like their offensive firepower will continue even with Jeff Grimes. And I know Cougar fans and Baylor fans, too, probably have their share of criticisms of Jeff Grimes, the play caller. But he comes into a staff under Lance Leipold, Kyle Nickey leaves, the OC for the Jayhawks. He leaves for Penn State, but most of the assistant coaches under him on the offensive staff stayed at Kansas. So that culture of what they've been running, all the creative looks under Leipold, I think that maintains. And Jeff Grimes, I think, will do a good job with an offensive line that did lose 3 players from a season ago along that starting offensive front. But I think Kansas is good enough to win it all. They got to have Jalen Daniels at quarterback. Devin Neal, I thought he got slept on not being in the first team all Big 12 ballot. I couldn't believe that. I was very surprised there. I think the defense, they got some questions on the D tackle spot, but I like Kansas. They got a pretty, balanced schedule, but again, pretty favorable as well. So I got the Jayhawks at number 2. I've got Utah at 3. And I'm very interested to see with Utah if it's just simply plug and play with Cam Rising. If he's just back to what he was before the injuries. I'm fascinated to see how that plays out. If Cam Rising is at full strength, Utah is going to have a great position to be back in Arlington. I think Utah's defense is going to be very good, one of the best in the Big 12. I like their defensive line with Junior Tafuna. I think Logan Fonnell, Cougar fans know him. I think he comes back from the injury, and I think he's going to be a star for them. I was kind of tempted to maybe put him as a all Big 12 pick, but I think it's a little bit too early right now. I did put Spencer Fano in my all Big 12 team. Van Fillinger should be pretty good. The defense is going to be stout. Utah's defense is going to be near the best in the Big 12, but I got questions about the offense. Again, the health of Cam Rising, will he just be back to what he once was? Curious to see. Running back situation, it's not as loaded as it's been in previous years. Mekhi Bernard comes back, Jalen Glover, but I feel like there's more to be had at that running back position. And look, I bring up the running back spot because this league has elite running backs, great ground attacks, and you better be one of the best ground attacks in college football if you're going to be near the top of this league because of the quality at that spot. Utah, though, the thing about them compared to most Big 12 teams is that you know what they are consistently, and I think that's kind of one of the things that a lot of media members are pointing to with the Utes. They get 21st place votes. K-State had 19. But, again, the schedule sets up nicely for them. They go at Oklahoma State on September 21st. We'll see what happens with Ollie Gordon and his suspicion of DUI arrest earlier this week. But that's an early kick for the Utes. And after that, I think spots against Arizona, TCU, BYU's a tough game no matter what. The rivalry game is always difficult. Iowa State and at UCF. I mean, there's spots Utah can lose. There are difficult games. I just think that you feel like there maybe coaching edge, maybe some of the veteran experience edge goes to the Utes. But they've got the distinction of being the preseason favorite. I don't look at this Utah team, though, as good as their 2019 team. I honestly think that's probably been their best team they've had maybe ever, even better than the 2008 and 2004 teams. I think their 2019 squad was the best that I've ever seen from Utah, and they didn't break through and win the Pac-12 that year. And it was an okay Pac-12, not a great Pac-12. It was okay. But still, so whenever you get those preseason expectations, it's tough to get to cross that finish line and win it all. That's what Utah's got in front of them now. The rest of my ballot. Number 4, I had Oklahoma State. Number 5, Arizona. 6, Iowa State. 7, UCF. 8, West Virginia. 9, Colorado. 10, Texas Tech. 11, TCU. 12, I have BYU. 13, Baylor. 14, Arizona State. 15, Cincinnati. 16, Houston. Let's dive into BYU. I mean, this is a BYU podcast after all, am I right? I got the Cougs at 12, and I've been thinking long and hard about this. And I'll be down at Big 12 Football Media Days, both days, in Las Vegas. I'm going to be heading out on Monday, which, by the way, my co-host, Matt Biamonte on Cougar Sports Saturday, he sent me a text today that he saw on X, expected to be the hottest day in the history of Las Vegas on Monday. Holy cow, it's going to be scorching hot. But I've been thinking long and hard about BYU's schedule. And what are expectations for this team? Expectations are low, But what can they get to? I believe this team can get to 6. I do, regardless of who's at quarterback. And they got to have good quarterback play. Don't get it twisted. I mean, they can't be terrible at that spot and expect to get to 6 because this schedule could snowball on them quick. This is one of the toughest schedules in the Big 12. And I know fans will probably say, well, there's no Texas and Oklahoma this year. Look, I understand there's probably not a clear-cut top 4 team on this schedule, but it's the balance. It's just every single week, all of these teams are just solid, at least what we know right now. The top 5 teams in the preseason poll are on BYU's schedule. Now, 4 of the 5 are coming to Provo, which helps the efforts. But still, as we saw last year, just being at home isn't good enough. You got to clean up mistakes, but it puts you in a position to maybe pull off some upsets. BYU's going to have to do that. BYU hasn't been a favorite in a game since the Southern Utah game in week 2. They were an underdog in every game last year, the final 10 games, but every Big 12 game last year, and you got to go in thinking you're probably going to be an underdog in every game again this year because what we know about Houston right now might not apply at the season's end. Same with Arizona State. Those could be 2 games that you could be favorites in, but right now, early part of the season, there's going to be some tough games. So BYU's schedule, Southern Illinois to open up, you're going to win that game. Southern Illinois has got some questions at quarterback. They've got a revamped defense. I know they've had success against FBS teams, but if you lose that game and you don't win in pretty stout, impressive fashion, there could be some concern. You got to impress in that game. Now, Southern Illinois is a good football, FCS football program, but still, you should handle them convincingly. BYU's got to do that. That's an important game. Week 2 at SMU on a Friday. I don't think Cougar fans are realizing enough how the potential of SMU. You're talking about potentially a top 25 football team, and BYU's going on the road to face them. They could be good enough to be in the ACC championship game this year, SMU, in year 1 of being in the ACC. The scheduling tactics here, I thought were a letdown for BYU. They set this program up to be in a tough road to navigate this season. I think that SMU game right now, if I was to predict, is a loss. Week 3 at Wyoming, I'm saying BYU wins. Despite all the potential Super Bowl for Wyoming, and it will be a big game. Laramie is going to be off the charts for this game. But BYU is going to win in Laramie. I feel confident in that. Week 4, Kansas State. I'd probably go loss. That's 2-2. I love the 1996 throwbacks. They look great. But I'd go Kansas State there in that spot. At Baylor, week 5. Baylor is fascinating to me. They're kind of in the same thought of BYU right now, the same grouping. And, Baylor made a splash in the transfer portal by getting DeQuan Finn from Toledo. They also have Sawyer Robertson coming back. That game in week 5 is big for BYU. And you know what? I'm going to say BYU wins that game. I think BYU finds a way to pull it off in Waco. And they start the season 3-2. BYU, and that would be their first Big 12 road win ever. BYU under Kalani Sitake is good in the month of September. They were a good September football team. Last year they started 4-1. 2 years ago they started 4-1. Back in 2021, they were undefeated. 2020, they were undefeated. BYU is good in September. Even 2019, they had a pair of top 25 wins or wins over big-time programs, Tennessee and USC, that season. 2018, they won at Wisconsin. BYU's good under Kalani in the first month. And you got to get to 3 in that first month, and I think you do. I'm going to say BYU gets to 3-2 and takes down Baylor. You then have a bye, and then you play Arizona. Arizona is intriguing to me. They got picked 5th in the preseason poll, 3 first-place votes. Arizona, I'm just fascinated to see what they do with a little bit of expectations behind them. You know, Arizona's a program, whenever the expectations are on them, they never deliver. I think back to that season under Rich Rod, they were a Fiesta Bowl team. They lost to Boise State. They were a 10-4 football team, and then the following year it's just 7-6, and then 2016 they're 3-9. BYU beat that 3-9 Arizona team in 2016. But Arizona's just never maintained consistency. And Noah Fafita stepped in around that USC game, and ever since they've just taken off, and they haven't lost a game since. But I could see a little bit of a step back. Last year they were 10-3, one of the best football teams by season's end in the country. And I think Brent Brennan is going to do a really good job here at Arizona. I'm not saying they're going to fall off a cliff, but I could see them going 7-6. And this could be a spot where BYU could pull off a win. It's crazy to me, considering how much BYU and Arizona have played, that this is the first game in Provo since 2007. This is the fourth different venue that BYU and Arizona have played against each other since Kalani Sitake has been the head coach. Glendale, Arizona, Tucson, Arizona, Las Vegas, and now Provo. And now it's a league game once again. BYU has won 12 games. Arizona's won 12 games in the series, and there's one tied. This is the 26th meeting all time. I will say BYU pulls off a win. I'll go 4-2. Coming off a bye, and I know last year BYU coming off a bye was not pretty. Think of that TCU game, but I'll say they get it done, and they get to 4-2. Oklahoma State on a short week on a Friday. I think they lose that one. Oklahoma State's interesting to me, though, because, well, the Ollie Gordon news won. But they were a team last year where it's either you're winning in epic fashion as they did against BYU, or they're getting thumped by Texas or UCF in Orlando. I know Oklahoma State has a ton of returning personnel. They've got 19 returning starters. Mike Gundy, 20th year as the head coach. Their recruiting, though, has dipped a little bit to me. It's just the recruiting rankings. I just feel like Oklahoma State doesn't have the depth, maybe. We'll see. I mean, the top end of their roster is good. The linebackers are really good with Colin Oliver and Nick Martin, some of the best in the Big 12. I put them on my first team all Big 12 ballot. They got good receivers. This is a game BYU could win. They battled with Oklahoma State last year. And this is one of those games, too, where, you know, when Kalani talks about, you know, they know now what it's like. The roster continuity should be able to say, hey, we went blow for blow with these guys last year in Stillwater when they were knocking on the door of the Big 12 title game, and we had them. Got to finish the job this year. But I will say Oklahoma State finds a way to get it done. I think it's going to be a close football game. At UCF, I'll say that's a loss for BYU. I think UCF's going to be pretty good. I think UCF has the potential. I know I picked them at 7, but they got the potential to crack into the top 4 of this league. I believe that. UCF is a program, to me, that's going to take off in the Big 12. I do believe that. I think the Knights get it done over BYU in Florida. Then BYU has a bye week, and then at Utah, I'll say the Utes in that one. Like, the thing is that BYU and Utah games are always going to be tough. I've been telling people this when I do radio interviews and other markets around the country talking about BYU and the Big 12. The BYU-Utah rivalry always lives up to the hype. You guys know that. I mean, you know living this rivalry, you know this thing always lives up to it. And I think an example of BYU and Utah is that the last time BYU went to Salt Lake, which is 2018, how crazy is that? I'm going into my 6th football season at KSL, and I've yet to cover a BYU game at Utah in Salt Lake. It's just crazy. But the last time they went to Salt Lake was in 2018, and BYU was a big underdog. Utah already had clinched the Pac-12 championship game spot as the Pac-12 South champ. BYU was up big, and we all know what happened. Jason Shelley pulls off a big comeback, and BYU blows a massive lead, and they choked against Utah. BYU hasn't won in Salt Lake since 2006. I think this game could be close. I don't think it's going to just be some massive beatdown. Again, a lot of this is assuming BYU is going to take care of business on the offensive end at quarterback. I think BYU's defense will keep them in games, but BYU's offense has got to produce. But I just think that rivalry game between BYU and Utah, it's just always close, man. Even in 2017, which I still stand by to this day, the worst BYU football team I have ever watched in my life was 2017. Last year was pretty close, but still not 2017 bad. They still only lost by 6 to Utah. I mean, this game just is always close. It's just how it always goes, with the exception of, 54-10 in 2011. 08 kind of got away from BYU with Max Hall and some of the picks. But other than that, I mean, they're pretty much close games. 2019 was one of the few games where Utah just kind of handled BYU. But then BYU in 2021, they pretty much handled Utah. So, and BYU's got the upper hand in the last meeting, and now you're equal conference foes now. So I will still say Utah wins that game, but I think it could be close once again. Kansas at home. I'll say that's a loss. Again, I'm high on Kansas, so a lot of that hinges on Jalen Daniels. The last time he played in a game was against BYU, and he was really good in that one. I think Kansas wins that football game. At Arizona State, I am fascinated to see what Arizona State becomes in the Big 12. I get the sense that Arizona State administration is not thrilled with this Big 12 move, but I think Kenny Dillingham is very excited. I think Kenny Dillingham, the head coach of the Sun Devils, entering year 2, I think there is a new sense of energy for him and the program. Last year they had a bowl ban. They got Sam Levitt at quarterback, and I think people were kind of looking at, they lost Jaden Rashad, a massive loss. I don't think that was the feeling around the desert. I mean, yes, it hurts depth, but there was a sense where it's just like, this is Sam Levitt's job. At least that's what it felt like from the reports coming out of Tempe in spring. I think Arizona State could be a team. They're going to be better in the trenches. They could be someone like BYU that's battling for a bowl spot in this matchup. But I think BYU wins this game. I do think they find a way to get this one done, and they win. I think they get their 5th win here in Tempe in a must-win spot, because how I got the schedule laid out, I got BYU at 4-6 going into this game. So this is a pressure cooker where you've got to win this, and I say BYU does. 5-6, and then the season finale, Houston. And I got to think that the Big 12 schedule makers thought this could be 2 5-6 football teams battling for a bowl bid. Houston's going to have upside in the Big 12 with Willie Fritz. This year is not that year, though. They've got Donovan Smith coming back at quarterback, and there could be a little bit of a quarterback debate. I'm curious to see what happens there at Houston. They got Zia and Chris as the backup, but there could be opportunity there. But they've just been raided by transfer portal, so much newness. They got a tough schedule. They got to go in non-conference play at Oklahoma. Look, I think it might be real optimistic to think Houston is at 5-6 in this game, but they could maybe, because I think Willie Fritz is just a dang good coach. He did a great job at Tulane, got them to a Cotton Bowl victory, and I think he'll do good things, and he'll bring some stability, I think, at Houston, because Holgerson never did that, and they had Tom Herman. He was outstanding, but he left in short order. I think Willie Fritz could build something at Houston and really close out his coaching career, however long that lasts, as a Houston Cougar. He's got great ties to the Houston area from his JC days. Anyway, I think, with all that said, I think BYU takes down Houston in the all-Cougar matchup. BYU's 3-0. against Houston all time. There's been some great games, too, against Houston. The 2013 game was an all-timer. Taysom Hill rewrote the NCAA record books in that one. 2014 was the 9/11 game on Thursday night. Taysom was great in that one, too. BYU's they started slow a little bit, but then they just kind of quietly pulled away. And then 2020, BYU was down big, and Zach Wilson and crew put together an impressive comeback and take down Houston 43-26 in the COVID season. So I think BYU gets to 6. I'm going to go with that. Like a couple months ago, I would have said 4-8. I would have said maybe 5-7. I'm saying 6 because of the home games, and I think BYU's got to pull off some upsets. Like I'm calling games in favor of BYU that, again, they're probably underdogs in. Baylor, Arizona, maybe Arizona State. You're probably an underdog in those games. You got to go and win them and pull off some upsets to get to 6. I think BYU finds a way to get it done. But I think the Cougs get to 6-6 this season. The thing is that the Big 12 Conference is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be an entertaining league. And I can't wait to see the future of this conference, what it becomes. And you hope for BYU that they do get back to the postseason this year and exceed everyone's expectations and maybe get to 8-9. That'd be great. No one's holding them back. Like, by all means, go chase for the title. Because in this league, unlike the other power conferences, there is no set hierarchy. This is a complete startup. And I think when Brett Yormark says that about this conference, it's 100% accurate because half of the members, 8 of the teams, they joined 20 within the past 24 months or 12 months. This is a practically new league with no history. And so when we talk about, hey, it could be the All-State 12, it could be this and that, like, might as well, because this league is just a startup, but they've got the power conference distinction, and they've got a real chance to really be an exciting brand of football. Now, will it translate to massive television audiences? Will it translate to 2 playoff teams? That I don't know yet. That's my one big concern with this Big 12 is that, yes, you get your conference champion as the 4 seed, but can you get an at-large bid in this thing? And again, I think the Big 12 set it up to where, schedule-wise, they're hoping Utah and Kansas State can be, at the top and be in that at-large pool. But as we know, and I said it in the beginning, that this league produces wild, uncanny results. So just to assume BYU is down and out or TCU's down and out, I would be very hesitant of that. I think TCU could have a bounce-back year this season. I think Andy Avalos as the defensive coordinator coming in. I think they're going to get back to a tougher brand of football on the defensive side this season with Avalos. And I think they take a step forward. And TCU is always dangerous when they're overlooked. And the same with BYU. BYU operates well as an underdog. But the thing is, I always remind people with that, though, is they've never been this big of an underdog. I mean, this is the lowest preseason expectations I've ever seen for a BYU football team in my lifetime. And I've been watching this program for the last 30 years. So it's a new world for BYU, but it can create a lot of opportunities to, identify success and get this program back on track. And there's a quiet confidence from this team, and it's still, though, in a wait-and-see mode that you have to prove it on the field. But I'm definitely fascinated to see it all come together. And I'll say right now that they get to 6, and they find a way to get that 6th win and get to bowl eligibility. And that's still not, I don't think, when I say that 6 and that's a success, no, you don't throw a parade for that. BYU football should never lower its standard. At some point here in the near future, I'd say around 2026, you better be in a conversation where you are chasing Big 12 titles. It's okay right now to be, 13th in year 2 of this league, but I think in another year or two, you better be a program that's in the thick of the race, and you're one of those 5 teams that going into a season has preseason expectations. I never subscribe to the thought of, you don't want expectations. Like, yes, you want expectations. You want your program to feel like anytime you step into a venue, you're just going to be assumed that you're winning because of that brand, that logo, your track record of success. You want to have the expectations. Pressure is a privilege, right? And you want that in your program. And there's always pressure in any college football program, but you want it to be championship or bust eventually. And that's what BYU's got to build towards. And the great thing about this league is that a championship leads to a college football playoff, and that's a new world for BYU in this conference. It's going to be a lot of fun, though. Again, all the coverage will be down there in Vegas. I'll be there. KSL Sports, KSL Sports Zone, KSL News Radio, KSL 5 TV. We will be everywhere inside Allegiant Stadium, getting you covered for all the things that you need to know about Big 12 Media Days. So I will talk to you then. Enjoy your holiday. We'll catch you next time here on the Cougar Tracks podcast, and it's powered by KSL Sports.